stuff. So in a way, it's the working ground for all of us aspiring bodhisattvas, all us novice bodhisattvas. And the bodhisattva represents someone who seeks enlightenment, someone who seeks awakening for the sake of all beings. One who practices not just for their own benefit, but for the benefit of all. And in a way, the two become inseparable. There's no sense of separation from self and other. So in a way, the six perfections are how a bodhisattva lives, with each of the qualities perfected, as it were. And I think for us, they're a bit like training principles. So I'll just remind you of the six paramitas, of the six perfections. So you've got firstly dana, which means generosity or giving. And by the way, that's also the second precept we just chanted of the positive precepts. With open-handed generosity, I purify my body. Then the second one is sila, which means uprightness or ethics. Then we have kshanti, meaning patience or forbearance. Virya, meaning vigor or energy. Dhyana, meaning meditation in the widest sense. And pranya, meaning wisdom. So, as I said earlier, we'll be going to look at each one over the coming weeks in a bit more detail. I've always found them a really inspiring list, the six paramitas, a really wonderful list of qualities with which to develop in one's life. And so, as I said, tonight we're going to be looking at dana, which is a Pali and Sanskrit word meaning generosity or giving. So in its perfected form, dana or dana paramita, it refers to the act of spontaneous giving, giving which is completely natural, even playful perhaps, giving which is completely unself-conscious, as there no longer exists this concept of self and other. Giving with one's whole being, so that all of you is involved and is behind the act, completely open-hearted. As opposed to the other side, or the flip side of that, is giving with kind of strings attached, if you like, with what's in it for me, what will I get back from it, or indeed not giving at all. So the first feels heart-opening, it feels expansive, it feels limitless, freeing, if you like, whereas the other feels contracted, restrictive, possessive, separating, this kind of this is me, this is mine kind of feeling. And I think you can definitely feel both those responses in the body. So this idea of this kind of open expansiveness, or this kind of really kind of restrictiveness, this constricting nature. And I'm sure we've all had a taste of both experiences, both responses. So when asked to give, we often have these two responses. One, the heart opening, the expansiveness of responding to the ask, to what's needed. And the other, the contraction of no. Why me? Not again. But I gave last time. And you've almost got the two poles, and you've got everything in between, all the grey areas of, well, where you've got a little bit of one, a little bit of the other. And I think it's really important to honour both responses, not to override either. So one can simply sit with them with awareness, noticing the feeling and value behind each response. And each will have its own value to us. So being curious about the no, the discomfort, and indeed the yes, the desire to help. And experiencing that creative tension that exists between the two, staying with that, I think it's a very, very fruitful place. So I'll give you an example. So when I'm asked to lead something, say like a Sangha night, like this evening, I notice within me a strong no. I don't want to. I want ease. I don't want the hassle of having to prepare and deliver it, the pressure of having to say something valuable, and helpful and even sound impressive or wise. I can sit with that discomfort, and I also notice a strong yes emerge. I do want to help. I do want to support the team, the other people who are teaching at the centre. I also have a sense that it will be good for me. I'll grow doing this. So I have those two responses. And often I think we can normally just go rapidly to one response. We can override the other. And I'd encourage you to take your time. Don't just go with the yes, or indeed the no, unless it feels perhaps very straightforward. Don't override or ignore bits of yourself, so that when you do go with the yes or the no, you can be more wholehearted about it, with the whole of yourself behind it, more integrated, if you like. So last year I did a Karanar appeal. I think a lot of you might have heard of Karanar. And indeed, some of you have done one or possibly even two of these appeals. I know Steph did one after me. Vajrapuri has done two. So I first heard about these appeals, the Karanar appeals, several years ago. I was at an event at Adhisthana. It was an international gathering, and there was about 150, maybe 200 of us in this huge shrine tent in the grounds of Adhisthana. And after explaining a little bit about the appeals and the work that they do by someone called Jayaraja, who's one of the founders of Karanar. So he stood up and explained a little bit about what Karanar does. And for those of you who don't know, the Karanar Trust is a Triratna-run charity whose basic aim is to end caste-based discrimination, poverty, and inequality in India and Nepal. And the appeals they run every year are for a group of people that live together in a community for 6 weeks and go out in the evenings, door knocking, raising awareness and funds for Karanar. So he said he was there in the shrine tent talking about Karanar, what a noble thing it is, what a great cause. And he asked people to stand up who had done an appeal. He's very, very convincing, Jayaraja. He's very good at what he does. He's very good at getting people to do appeals. So several people, about half a dozen people stood up out of about 150. And I found myself being really this strong sense of admiration, this strong sense of a desire to help. So a kind of big yes, if you like. And I just said to myself, you must do one of these appeals one of these days. But did I? Well, it took me years to do an appeal. Because I also noticed after that initial response of a yes, I had a big resistance to going out, and the thought of knocking on people's doors and asking for money, for help, that was a really strong no. That was something that I really, really didn't want to do. It really sort of took me outside of my comfort zone. So I sat with this in the background over these several years. But I did know there was, from time to time, I would touch in with this initial yes, this initial desire to help and respond. And I would touch in with that feeling evoked in the shrine tent that day. And it wasn't until I was talking with a good friend of mine, Akasha Mitra, who works for Karanar. And he said he was going to do one of these appeals. And would I like to join him? And I could feel that tension. But I decided to go for it, partly to honour what I'd responded to all those years before, and also just responding to his request. And indeed, right up to, and indeed during the appeal, the no kept rearing its head. It kept coming up from time to time. Often in the afternoons, I'd be preparing to go out in my area. So we each had our own little patch that we'd be door knocking. And over 6 weeks, I think I knocked well over 1,000 doors. And each afternoon I'd feel, well, most actually, I'd feel this sinking feeling in my stomach. this resistance to wanting to go out at all. And I'd try and stay in touch with that. I wouldn't try and override that. But I'd also try and stay in touch with the cause, with why I was doing this, what I was doing this for. So in a way, a kind of bigger picture. The fantastic work that Abhayanara does in helping the folk in India and Nepal who are far worse off than I am. And also I had the people I was doing this with. So I lived with 4 other guys and they were having similar sort of struggles, if you like. And just being able to support each other through this, that was fantastic, having that encouragement. So this appeal, it gave me many things, but it certainly gave me a great opportunity to explore my attitude to giving and to receiving and asking others to help. So it was a very, very growthful process. And at times when I was kind of brave enough, I could just explore the no with someone on the door. So you get someone and you could start to just be a bit playful with their no, because you realise that that's just their kind of initial response maybe, and there might be something under that. And I remember on this one occasion, I explored this no with someone, and then I realised it wasn't a no at all. It was just that was their sort of conditioned response to someone being on their door. And it felt quite freeing for them to explore that with me. And then they felt really, really grateful and wanted to give. So it was interesting to see how it turned around. So in a way, I think it was like 6 weeks of intensely practicing the Metta Bhavana. So I can thoroughly recommend it, but it's definitely challenging. So that's one example. But we can give in so many different ways. We can give money, obviously, and material things. We can think of food and clothing, and which makes me think of the food bank and the things that Simon does, donating, getting the food bank delivery every week and giving out food and stuff. We can do appeals, but we can give our time and our energy, as well as our friendship. I think sometimes simply listening to a friend in distress can be a real act of giving, a real act of generosity. There's also, traditionally, there's the gift of fearlessness, the gift of confidence, of strength and encouragement. And it's said that the Bodhisattva, simply by their presence, their example, gives freedom, freedom from fear, as they have conquered and transcended all fear. And I think fear and anxiety seem very prevalent in today's world. And it made me think of my dear friend Sangadeva, who works at Adhisthana as a gardener, amongst other things. And often when I see him, he has this kind of fearless quality. And he really gives me a lot of encouragement. He really gives me a lot of faith as well in the path, in what I'm doing, as well as friendship. He gives me that sort of sense of strength and encouragement just by his very presence. So it makes me think a little bit of the effect of a kind of bodhisattva, if you like. We can also give our merit, which is a kind of traditional term, if you like. And often at the end of a retreat or a puja or a meditation, we transfer our merits. We have this act of transferring our merits. So we give up any benefit we've gained from the practice to and for the benefit of all beings. I think of it as sort of sharing out our merit equally. So that's another act of a bodhisattva. We're just giving up whatever we may have benefited from in the practice, and we're just sharing that out amongst all, unconditionally, if you like. So I think that's a very, very beautiful practice. And we can also give the gift of the Dharma. So the gift of the truth, of the teaching. And this is seen as the greatest gift. And we can do that by talking about it, giving talks, talking to friends, or we can just simply do it by our example, by how we lead our lives. But I think what's important is not necessarily what is actually given, but the attitude of heart and mind behind the giving. So ideally, it's an outward expression of one's inner generosity, coming from a place of abundance, of joy, if you like, coming from a place of metta, of loving kindness, of unconditional loving kindness. And who can we give to? We can give to anyone and everyone. We can give to people in the Sangha, our friends and relatives, complete strangers, those less well off than ourselves, ideally to all sentient beings. So that means the animal world as well as the human world. So we can give to anyone and everyone. And then how should we give? Well, here's the ideal, and to quote Sangharachita, we should give courteously, happily, quickly, without regret, without telling others, that's an interesting one, to friend and to foe, to good and bad, everywhere and at all times, but according to people's real needs rather than wants. I found that quite interesting, but according to people's real needs rather than wants. So really being in touch with what's needed. So that's quite a lot, that's quite a big ask. And I was just thinking about that. And although I said earlier, I try and sit with the yes and the no, there's something I've learned about myself, is that I'm quite quick to know. So I'm quite quick to go to the no and sort of dismiss the yes. So another thing I'm doing, which might slightly contradict what I was saying earlier, is I try to practice acting upon every opportunity or request I get to be generous. So whether it's giving money to a good cause or helping someone or giving a talk, it gets me into the practice of giving. And I think this doesn't necessarily, is everyone's, we're all different in a way, the way we respond. But I think because I noticed a resistance, it was quite good to just create a kind of positive habit out of just giving, almost like, just what the heck, just do it. Just get yourself out of the way. Just do it sort of, as he says, courteously, happily and quickly. But I would say also keeping in touch with any resistance. So not ignoring that side of myself. So I think in a way it's a learning process. And I think in some situations it's appropriate for me just to say, oh, just do it, Abhayanara, just give. And in others it's good to honour that side of me that's resistant and what that's about, just to explore it. I think it's quite easy for me to think I'll do something, to feel the urge to help, or not, as the case may be, and to let that lapse or simply forget it. Like the case of waiting several years before doing a Karuna appeal. So I think it can be good sometimes to respond happily and quickly. As I say, not making such a big deal out of it, getting ourselves out of the way. And in that vein, I'm quite inspired by the idea of service. Simply serving a situation, serving and giving whatever's needed. Just kind of responding to what's ever requested and not getting too wrapped up in my own personal preferences. And I think that's something that I've learned for myself with my response. And another person that inspires me in this way is the chair of Adhisthana, Sadhanandi, who I've been fortunate enough to work with over the years. And she's a real, she just seems to give in every opportunity. And she's always helping others, always, whether it's just like, she's always doing something to contribute to the kind of greater community, if you like. And often going beyond what seems like her own personal preferences. I've heard her talk about this, that at the start, that was a definite practice of hers, was to go beyond her personal preferences. And so I see her down there, whether she's doing the washing up, baking scones, or giving a talk, or talking to a friend, or something like that. She really kind of quite exemplifies this, which I find I really admire, actually. And it also made me think, the whole area of dana, of generosity, of giving, just makes me think about our centre and our Sangha. So our whole centre came about due to the generosity of so many people. either through donating money or the gift of people's time and energy to purchase and refurbish the centre. 5 years ago now, it's been 5 years since we did that project. And that spirit continues. I think we currently have I think it's well over 30 centre guardians who freely give their time and energy to keep the centre thriving. Being it ordering the biscuits, or weeding the garden, or teaching courses. And we've got frequent fundraising activities that go on throughout the year. They've been a little bit scuppered this year, thanks to the virus, but we still have had some things go on online to help pay off our loans, to help keep the building running and so forth. So in a way, we're all sharing in that act of giving, ideally to benefit as many people as possible, so that as an ever-widening circle, the Sangha grows. And at the centre, and indeed throughout a lot of Triratna organisations and centres, we operate what is known as a Dana economy, which you might have heard of. So a Dana economy is a gift economy, or an economy rooted in generosity. So everything we offer is run in the spirit of Dana. And the basic principle you might have heard of the Dana economy is give what you can, take what you need. So give what you can, take what you need. I find it very inspiring. I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic if the whole world just worked on that basis of giving what they could and taking what they needed? Going back to Abhayanara again, because I got to know quite a lot about the Abhayanara organisation. So the people who work for Abhayanara, they're paid, but they're paid according to their need. So you say what you want, what you need, you make a case. So someone with a family will be paid more than someone who's on their own. And that's how it operates, which I think is fantastic. So that's how we try and run the centre. Well, that's how we do run the centre. And then, of course, when I think of Dana, I think of our Dana bowl. So we've got our lovely wooden Dana bowl in the centre, which is probably getting a bit lonely, actually. It hasn't been seen for quite a few weeks. And it was made for us beautifully by grant. And that's where we can leave donations to help support the centre. But because we can't access it, and here's a bit of a plug, we have what I'm calling the virtual Dana bowl. So there's a link on our website to a PayPal account where you can make a one-off or a regular donation. And I think they're really helpful, those donations, to keep the place well on a sure footing, to cover our overheads, to pay off loans and plan for the future. So that's a few thoughts from me about Dana, about generosity, the first of the paramitars, and a little bit of a plug for supporting the centre if you feel so moved. So now what I thought we'd do was break into small groups, maybe of 4 or so, and then we've just got a little bit of a chance to explore that for ourselves in the group. And what I thought we could look at is maybe exploring this creative tension I talked about between a yes and a no when you're responding to a request or a need. So are you able to be with the yes and the no without rushing to one or another? So this creative tension. So maybe you've had that experience. You could talk about what that feels like. And if you haven't, maybe you could explore how you imagine it would be. So that's the little question I'm going to leave you with. So it's exploring that creative tension between a yes and a no when you're responding to a need or a request, and not rushing straight to one or the other.